Good morning, and welcome to Keycode Media's Inputs Outputs, a kinda new series dedicated to giving you short technical tutorials for the production, post-production, and audiovisual industries. Each presentation will run around 20 minutes and will be followed by a live Q&A with you, the audience. I'm your host, Jeff Sengpil. Today we're going to talk about how you can easily add NVMe to your infrastructure by leveraging Quantum StorNext file system pools. Broadcasters, studios, post houses, and corporations are all deploying NVMe production storage to handle more high-res content, produce content more quickly, and reduce their infrastructure costs and complexity. We showed you, about this time last year, the wicked fast NVMe addition into StorNext. Well, now with a new capability in the Quantum StorNext file system called StorNext File System Pools, engineers can build production environments using both NVMe and disk-based storage pools. Then you can move files and folders between those pools depending upon your current need. The result of all this is an infrastructure that can be optimized for both performance and cost based upon your workflow. Joining us today is Quantum's technical marketing engineer, Dan Duperron. He will be demonstrating this new StorNext feature and how you can use it in your environment today. While Dan with Quantum is getting ready, did you know that Keycode Media is an industry-leading systems integrator with a small army of engineers specialized in post-production, broadcast, and audiovisual solutions? If you need equipment, we have it. If you have a complex problem, we've likely solved it. If you need support, our engineers are available 7 days a week, 24 hours a day. At the end of Quantum's presentation, we'll invite all of you to participate in the live Q&A. Please submit your questions via the Vimeo, Facebook Live, or YouTube chat. We will try our best to answer all of them. Dan, the floor is yours.
All right, hello everyone. Thanks Keycode Media for that great intro. And let's dive right into the content. Before I go into the GUI and start typing on the keyboard, I have just 2 slides here to set up, talk about what we're looking at, make sure you'll understand what we're going to see in the GUI. So this feature is called a number of names, file system pools, primary storage tiering. It's all the same thing. And this is a feature that will be generally available in StorNext 7. However, the code's actually been done for a while, and we have what we call a limited feature release of StorNext 7, where you can preview and use this feature today. Now for us, a limited feature release, or LFR, that's not a beta. This is production level code. We consider it ready to go. So you can use that today. We have several customers, including one very large one, that have been working with pools, and they like the feature, giving us some great feedback. But the feature that you'll see here today is production level code. Now, what is it? Well, pools lets you create, surprise, pools with various classes of storage, all within a single file system. For example, you may have just purchased a nice, shiny new NVMe storage array. Super fast, but chances are you probably couldn't afford to buy as much of that as you really wanted to, right? So you're still going to have other storage around. You could create one pool with that NVMe array and create another pool with all of your bulk hard drive storage. Remember, this is all in the same file system. And then you can move content back and forth between those pools depending on the performance requirements in a very flexible way. You can have many pools. We expect that most people will create a couple, 3, 4, a small handful. But if you want more, the capability is there. And I mentioned NVMe, but this doesn't require NVMe. You can still get a benefit from pools anytime you have tiers of storage with different performance characteristics. So that could be just an SSD and an traditional all-flash array, as well as some hard drive storage. That works too. Any block storage class in StorNext works with pools. If you're familiar with StorNext, you're probably aware that it's able to do tiering, and has been for a long time, to secondary storage targets, things like public cloud, object storage, and tape. This pools feature is not part of that tiering system. So this is entirely separate and entirely within the file system itself. So that means you don't need to license that secondary storage tiering if you don't need it. It's not required to use file system pools. As far as where this fits into the StorNext hierarchy in the architecture, let me explain that. Those of you familiar with StorNext, hopefully this will help you fit it into that model you have in your head. Starting from the bottom up, you've got a set of storage devices. I don't care if they're NVMe, SSD, hard drives, Vulkan memory crystals, DNA storage, whatever's next, you've got some block storage devices. And these days, we bundle those for reasons of protection and performance into RAID sets. And typically, we carve those RAID sets up into LUNs. And if you're creating a StorNext file system, you'll bundle those LUNs into stripe groups. Before pools, a file system would simply always be a collection of stripe groups. Now with pools, as you see here in the diagram, it's another level of abstraction above stripe groups. Still have your storage devices, RAID sets, LUNs, stripe groups, but now a pool is one or more stripe groups, and a file system consists of one or more pools. That's where things fit together in the big stack. Okay, enough of this PowerPoint stuff. Let's look at it for real. The screen you're looking at here in my Chrome browser is a sign-in screen of the new StorNext Unified UI that will debut in StorNext 7. Of course, that one won't have these notes here about how to log in. This is a test system. So I am going to log in. And that brings us to the solutions page. Now, because it's a test system, you're going to see some things here that look like they're broken. Something's always broken in test, so don't be alarmed by any of that. We'll do all our work here on the Services tab. And one of the data services is File System Tiering. So we can click this link to manage it. This dumps us at the Jobs screen. Now, the first thing here, on the top, you'll see there's a drop-down for the tiering mover. And I'm going to select a machine called Summit 8. There's also one called Summit 1. As you can imagine, moving content back and forth between pools takes some horsepower. And depending on how much stuff you're moving around, it can take more horsepower. So you have the ability to scale out the number of systems that are acting as data movers. Any Linux StorNext client can be a mover, and you'd see your list of all your movers here. And I'm just going to use this one called Summit 8. Now, before we can move any data around, we have to create some pools, and then we have to move some files into the pools. So let's switch here to the pools screen. You can see here we've got two file systems already, SNFS 1 and 2. Each of them has two pools. That's great. We're going to work with a third file system called SNFS 3. And if I filter on that one, you'll see it has no pools. So let's create one. Click Create Pool. First thing we do is select the file system, SNFS 3, and then we have to give the pool a name. I'm going to call this one Fast Dan. And let's just pretend that this is some nice, super fast NVMe storage. I don't have any of that stuff to play with, but let's just pretend that it is. And I'll select stripe group SG1 to be in that pool. Down in the bottom right, I'll click Submit, and that pool gets created. You see it here on the bottom of the screen. Pretty simple. Well, let's quickly create another pool. Click Create New Pool again, select the file system. This one we'll call Slow Dan, and we'll pretend it's my big, slow hard drive storage. I'll put stripe group SG2 into that pool. Click Submit. All right. So I'm going to filter out just the SNFS 3 file system just to reduce the clutter on the screen here visually. And you can see we've got that file system with its two pools, Fast Dan and Slow Dan. Great. All right, let's look at some content that we're going to move around. I'm going to bring up a putty window. Hopefully you can see this here. And right now I'm logged into System Summit 8, and I'm at the root where the SNFS3 file system is mounted, which is StorNext/SNFS3. Okay, let's look at what's in there. Let's look at a list of directories. Several directories. We're going to work with the one called Project 1. Let's see what's in there. Okay, pretty simple. 10 files, all with these cryptic names because they were created by a data generator we use. It's called vidIO, and they're all about 10 meg in size. Now, I want to show you where these files are. And when I say where they are, I mean in what pool they currently reside. So I need to use the sntier command with the location option. And you can see that each of these files is listed as being in pool none. So these files are not in a pool right now. They're somewhere else on the storage in the file system that's not associated with a pool. Okay, I'll minimize this putty window. And let's go back in the GUI to our jobs screen. I want to create a job that takes all 10 of those files and moves them into pool slow Dan. Very basic job. I'll click New Job, and then we've got 3 steps here. First, we have to select the file system, SNFS3. For action, I'll select Move. And you see there's some other actions here. I'll go back and review these in a little bit, but for now, we'll just do a move. Our target pool is going to be slow Dan, and our job root will be the Project 1 directory. Now, optionally on the right, you can add an email address to get notified of job status. I'll skip that and click Next. Step 2, you can add some filters. And there's a big list of possible criteria here. Now, for this job, we don't need any because I just want to move all files in that directory. So we'll leave that blank, but I'll come back to it. Click Next. And step 3 is scheduling. Jobs are very simple. They either run now or they run at a specified time in the future, but they run once. So I'm going to run this job now. Okay, this brings us back to the jobs screen, and you can see under Read Jobs, it was a pretty small job. It's already done. No errors. I can drop this down and look at the status. Okay. Well, the thing I wanted to see here is that there were 10 files moved, which is what I expect. And the target pool is slow Dan. Great. Let's pull up putty again and do that location command again and see what's changed. Okay, as you can see, all 10 of those files now reside in pool slow Dan. So that's what that job did. They were actually moved from whatever storage they lived on to the storage underneath pool slow Dan. I'll minimize that putty window again. And now let's imagine I need to work on 3 of these files and I need high performance. So I want to move those files up into my fast pool. Let's create a quick job to do that. Click New Job. Again, the file system will be SNFS3. The action will be a move. This time our target pool is fast Dan. Our job root will be the same, Project 1. And by the way, you see this recursive checkbox. That just means that we're going to run this job on all the content in Project 1 and down below it. Leave the email notification blank, and I'll click Next. Now I need to select a criteria that's going to filter out just the 3 files I want. You see our options here: minimum and maximum file size, files changed or not changed or accessed in a certain time period, only files that currently reside in a specific pool, only files that match or do not match a regular expression, only files and only directories. Lots of options here. I'm going to choose process only files matching a regular expression. The regular expression I'm going to use is this one. Now this will be applied to or compared to the file names in that directory, and this action, this move, will only happen on files whose file names match this regular expression. And what that means is all file names that start with vidio underscore 00001 and then either a 0, a 1, or a 2 as the last character. Said another way, this is going to filter out just files vidio 10, 11, and 12, and it's only going to move those three. Click Add Criterion to add that to my criteria. And as you can see here, I have the ability to stack multiple criteria. So I could go through if I needed to do more sophisticated filtering and add one or even more additional criteria. But we just need the one. So let's click Next. For scheduling, we're going to run it now. Submit. And we come back to the jobs screen where we can see the job's already done. If I open up the detailed status, it shows files moved as 3, which is good because that's what I intended. Now finally, we'll go back to PuTTY, run that location command again. And you can see now that files vidio 10, 11, and 12 reside on pool fast Dan. So this is exactly what I wanted. I wanted those 3 files to move into the fast pool so I could do some work on them. Great. You may be wondering, seeing me flip back and forth here, hey Dan, why can't you view where stuff's at in the GUI? Right? Why do you have to go to the CLI to see where files are? Well, the short answer is this is a temporary situation. We have something called the Offline File Manager. It's been in StorNext for a while. It's a plugin for Mac Finder and Windows Explorer. And it allows a user on those file browsers insight into where files live in the StorNext hierarchy and control over where they live. We're in the middle of enhancing that tool for StorNext 7. So the StorNext 7 version of Offline File Manager will allow you to see right in your file browser what pool a file or directory resides in and allow you to take actions like moving a file to a different pool. That work isn't done yet, so for now, we have to use the CLI. But that'll be in StorNext 7. Okay. Now, I promised to tell you a few other things about jobs, so let's go back and look at the actions specifically. Here's this action dropdown. We've done moves. You'll see there's some other job types here: promote, demote, remove, and inventory. Now, a move is physically moving file content, blocks of data, from one class of storage to another, right? From one pool to another. That's great in most cases. But let's say you need to move content from one pool to another for a read-only use, like streaming something out. Well, in that case, it's kind of silly and wasteful when you're all done with that to have to move those data blocks back. Right? It's a waste of time and resources. So if you know you're moving content for a read-only purpose, you can instead use promote. And promote, instead of moving the content, it creates a copy on the new target pool. If that copy is unchanged when you later do a demote, nothing has to get moved back to the source pool, because that source pool still has a hidden copy. What happens is the target pool's copy of that unchanged content is just removed, and the hidden copy on the original pool is made visible again. So it saves you half the bandwidth, essentially, when you don't need to be doing an actual move. Now, remove is used when you need to move files out of a pool. And once you've removed them from a pool, you'll see them show up as none, which is how they appeared initially in our PuTTY session there. And then finally, the inventory action is going to spit out a list of files in the pool and some other information. So those are the different action types. Okay. Let's get out of there. Now, remember, I mentioned that a job runs once, either right now or at a specified time in the future. But there are times where you may want to do something repetitively. You may want to look for a certain type of content once a day at midnight and move it from place A to B, pool A to B. And that's where policies come in. Policies, I'm on the policy screen now. Policies are very, very similar to jobs. So I'm not going to go through and configure one, but you can essentially think of a policy as a job that runs on a schedule. Wakes up, looks for work to do based on the filters. If it finds content it needs to act on, it acts on that content, goes back to sleep till next time. Very straightforward. Policies do have a couple of additional capabilities that jobs don't have. For example, a policy can act based on the fill level of a pool. So, for example, you could say, hey, if this pool is 80% full or more, then I want to look for content that hasn't been accessed in 2 days, and I want to move it to this other pool. So that's something you can do with a policy that you can't do with a job. But that's basically it. Pools, very simple to use, very powerful way to move content around. And with that, I'll hand it back to Keycode Media for the live Q&A.
All right, thanks, Dan. So let's dive into the live Q&A. Everyone out there is encouraged to send your questions in via the Vimeo, Facebook Live, or YouTube chats. Let's see what we've got so far. Some questions are already answered. What version of StorNext do I need?
Great.
That's 7. When is StorNext 7 coming out?
Okay, well, StorNext 7 is due this fall. I'm not able to give you a super precise date because, software development's not a straight line, but you'll see it this fall.
So just in time for IBC. Oh, wait.
Yeah.
So how do I get my company into the LFR to start using this now?
Okay, well, easiest way is to just contact anybody at Quantum you know. If you've got a sales contact or a reseller, that's fine. Or if you haven't spoken with us before, hit us up on chat on the website or hit the 800 number.
Awesome. Yeah, you can give us a holler here at Keycode. We can get you hooked up. Let's see. How does this integrate into my system? Are file system pools a plugin or an add-in, or does it come free with StorNext?
Hey, that's a great question. There were a lot of things I couldn't cover in a super brief demo, but this is just a feature of StorNext 7. So it's in there waiting for you to turn it on. So if you upgrade to StorNext 7 from whatever version you have now, you'll get it. There's no additional license or additional fee for it.
Very cool. What third-party storage providers will connect with StorNext file system pools?
Okay, another interesting question. So if you've followed StorNext for 20 years like I have, you would know this, but probably most of you haven't. So StorNext is not dependent on any specific brand of storage. It's completely agnostic. So you can use any block storage device you want with this thing. And I joked about Vulkan memory crystals and DNA memory, but if it looks like block storage, it'll work. That's all you need.
I don't know if Vulkan memory crystals are, I think they're crystal storage, not block. We'll have to check with some folks.
Yeah.
So on the cloud provider side, which of the cloud providers are supported in StorNext Flex tier? Any that you prefer?
We have no preference, and we test all comers. So we've got the big three, right? Amazon, Google, and Azure. And then we've tested other specific ones like for the Fed market, things like OROC. We've got some others on our list like Backblaze. But if there's one that you use that you think is critical and we don't currently support it, the tests are pretty easy, right? It's all standard S3 stuff. So let us know and we'll try to get them into our test flow.
I know we've had some folks that have been interested in Wasabi. The egress costs are a little less than others.
Right.
How can file system pools be leveraged to optimize performance in multi-site installations across different time zones?
Well, I wish it was that fancy. Mm-hmm. Today, it's really a single system operation. So you've got one StorNext system that's going to live somewhere, and it's going to have primary storage associated with it, and pools are going to operate on that. So, of course, you can connect to that across a VPN or however you want to do that from elsewhere, but pools isn't going to move content across geographies for you. We can move content into the cloud with our standard secondary storage tiering. And then now something we just announced with StorNext 6.4 here a few weeks ago, we're now embedding metadata with that content we store in the cloud so that you can use it from elsewhere. So for example, you can see what file name and path it was associated with on the StorNext system that put it up there. So we do have ways to collaborate multi-geo through the cloud, but pools is not one of them.
That's interesting. Is there a way to get that path information to conform? I know a lot of people, the path is critical to linking of media.
Right. Well, it's stored in user-defined metadata, and we support all the standard S3 way of doing that. So you do have to either go into something like the AWS Cloud Console if it's just a one-off, or you need to write a little code to be able to extract that. But as part of an orchestrated workflow, it's very possible to push things up on one side and then have a tool pull them down and retain that path.
Pull it down and put it into that same path inside of a different system, and then everybody works.
Exactly.
We like it when everybody just works.
Yeah.
Comes in handy. Is there any special licensing that's needed for a data mover? You'd said any Linux system.
No, there's not. So there's a little subtlety to that. So it has to be a StorNext 7 client. So that's really the stipulation, and a Red Hat or CentOS 7 Linux client. So those are the ones right now.
And from my understanding of the licensing, Linux clients are always required to have a license, so it'll be there, I guess, anyway.
Right, exactly. And it's the daemon that runs this operation on the client is already there, waiting for you to turn it on if you've got that Linux client installed.
Okay. A couple more questions here. If I've got multiple data movers, is there any way to see status on all moving data on a single screen?
Not the way the GUI is built today. We are trying to do more consolidation, and you'll see more of that in that unified UI for StorNext 7. But at least the way it's built today, you choose a data mover and then you see that screen. You can have the same file system mounted in multiple movers, but there's no godlike view of all the movers.
Okay. Let's see. Is there a way to hide files or folders from a pool?
Hide from a pool. The way I would do that would be not assign them to a pool or assign them to a pool you wanted to keep out of the way. There's no explicit way to hide. There is the option to do sort of the opposite. You can pin content to a pool, and then it's not affected by a regular policy that would run. But we don't have the inverse of that exactly.
Interesting. Is it possible to have more than one set of drives as have a set of drives in more than one pool at once?
No, it's not. So if you remember that hierarchy, right, you went from storage devices all the way up through LUNs and stripe groups. Stripe groups are not shared. So with a pool, you define, you pick stripe groups. And if you look during the demo, you'll see I started with 2 stripe groups. I assigned one to a pool. When I went to create that second pool, that first stripe group was gone. It wasn't on the list. I couldn't select it. I only had the remaining one.
Okay.
So these are exclusive.
So is there a way to determine which stripe group inside of a pool data lives on just by taking a quick glance at it?
I don't know of a way with a quick glance. There's certainly ways you could do that at the command line, but remember in an ideal case, all that guts and complexity of the system should be transparent, and you shouldn't need to think about it. So there are, of course, ways to discover all of that, but really hope you don't need to. Hopefully you can just think about the pool. The pool would normally have one type of storage in it, so you'd have just a uniform performance expectation for that. And if it's in that pool, you know what to expect.
Awesome. Well, not seeing any other questions come in. Dan, thanks for joining us today and going over storage pools.
Appreciate it, Jeff.
And that's it for KeyCode Inputs Outputs. If you have questions about quantum stuff, please don't hesitate to reach out to KeyCode Media. We've got some answers. And we also have apparently an army of engineers. At least that's what I heard somebody say before. Thanks for joining us today. Have a great rest of your day.